Hey guys, hey, hello. How you doing? We don't really start right now. So if you like to make a cup of tea, open a beer, or pour in some wine, now is the time. We are just relaxing, have a little chat, because before we start with our, you already can read it, talk about social entrepreneurship. And before you really get to know to all the speakers we have tonight. We have fabulous speakers tonight. I want to know a little bit more about you. So I want to interact with you, and the way to go is our chat. I hope most of you know how a Zoom chat works. You should see a button at the lower end of your screen that is called chat, and you can try it out right now. Write something that you think is appropriate, like hello. My name is Michael. If you like, you also can add some more information, like where in what city are you right now? I'm in Graz at the moment. We had some really nice weather today. I was in the park enjoying my time. It was really sunny. That was cool. Thanks, Felix. I like the cap as well. Clara is from Vienna. Nice to have you here. That are the good things about online meetings. It can be from all over the world. Nice to have you here. If you like, you also really can add some information. Did you have some good weather if you're not in Graz today? Was it cool? Hey Marie, greetings to Nuremberg. So even later on, I think I will have the whole night a little peek on the chat. So whenever you want to ask anything, you can write it in the chat. Hello Tati, hello Antonia, hello Fabian from Vienna. Nice to have you here. But Tim, could you go on to the next slide? Because we have also another tool for you. You can, if you're not feeling like you want to share something and you want to be more anonymous about what you want to say, you can use Menti. You can scan this QR code that is on the screen with your phone, or go on menti.com and type in the code that is below 277286.7, and there you can message everything you want to message us. And questions for the speakers later on, and also if you like to give some feedback or anything, you can use this tool. But of course, you always can use the chat. So yeah, today's session will be recorded. So if you want to, especially for the audience, if you want to put your camera on, be aware that we will record the session. I think the recording should start in a few moments. Because also later on, I'll just go over to the schedule, where actually you can see we are in the welcoming part. So hello. After that, I will hand over to my colleague Antonia, and then we will start with what is oikos, what is social entrepreneurship, what is this all about. Later, then we see our speakers, and we have the big discussion time among our speakers on our topic today. And after that, we have enough time for all your questions. So whenever you have a question, you can write it down in the chat. You can write it via Menti. And if you like later, maybe you can raise your hand. There is a reaction symbol down in the Zoom symbol bar. So if you raise your hand there, we can also allow you to say something out loud. Just please be aware about that we record that. And then last but not least, what's next? We will have a short outlook to our next oikos talk. Before we start, I just wanted to make a recap about last oikos talk. That was my first one. It was about human rights in the value chain. And for those of you who are from Germany, there are some interesting news from last week, because there might be a new law that's called Lieferkettengesetz that should be through the Bundestag this year, so 2021. And I have a recommendation for a podcast. I don't want to go too deep into detail. There's a podcast that's called Lage der Nation. In the last episode, they speak a little bit about this new law. And if you're interested, if you were with us last time, maybe you want to listen to that, not right now, but maybe tonight before sleep or whenever you like. I will post a link in the chat so you find that. If I can do that. But you also find Lage der Nation on all normal podcast apps you use, Spotify, for example. So now we're really going to start, and I hand over to my colleague, Antonia.
Hello, everyone. A warm welcome also from my side. Thank you, Michael, for this nice introduction. And now we can actually go to the next slide. And most of you might already have heard about oikos and maybe even oikos talks, but still I would just give you a really brief overview of what it's about. So oikos Graz is actually like a student association in Graz. So we're basically all students from different study programs, mostly related to sustainability. And oikos Graz is part of Oikos International. So oikos is actually an international thing, like led by students. And so there's not only oikos Graz, there's also oikos Vienna, oikos Leipzig, oikos Copenhagen, and many other oikoses all around the world. So it's not just us, unfortunately, but we're happy that we have you here. And yeah, so Oikos International itself was already founded like 35 years ago. And that was founded in Switzerland, but now, yeah, as I said, it's distributed within the world. So oikos in general is committed to promote sustainable management, sustainable economics. So we look at the sustainable point of view. And what we actually do is we organize events, discussion rounds, dialogues, networking, so many different things. And one thing that we do with Oikos Graz is Oikos Talks. And that's what we're here for. And with Oikos Talks, we have now we try to have monthly events where we try to connect people. We have discussion rounds and informations. And yeah, so we focus on a wide range of different topics. And as we want to have some experts all the time, yeah, we invite speakers that are relevant in that topic that we want to talk about. So also today we will have 3 really interesting speakers that I will introduce quite soon. And now we can go to the next slide. And actually we decided that we're gonna have a talk series now, so that we have like a frame for all the upcoming events that we're gonna have. And this frame is called Reconomy. So it's like made out of rethink economy and redefine economy, whatever you want to use. And I mean, we're all aware that there's some change needed to achieve a sustainable way of doing business. So with all our talks that are coming up, and also today, we look at how can a sustainable business look like, how that can work. And actually, now to lead over to the topic of social entrepreneurship, maybe you know that sustainability is made out of 3 dimensions. So sustainability is actually related to economy. It's related to sustainable way of doing business, like long-term profit orientation. But sustainability is also looking for the environment, caring for our planet. And the third one is actually looking for social concerns. And actually, this is the thing that is sometimes not so much taken care of, because many people think, oh, sustainability is about saving our planet. But it's not only about changing our planet, it's also about thinking about the people that live on the planet. So, and now having said this, I can actually lead over to Markus Bachmann. I will introduce him soon, but before doing that, we have a small question for you. So what do you think social entrepreneurship is? Before we start defining it.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, let me post, let's see whether this works, because I prepared some questions in Menti, and I have a different Menti code. And I hope that I will not confuse people too much. And I entered questions under that different number. And if you go to that number and enter on menti.com 6299450, you will come to a page where, let's see, go forward. There's the first question. And actually, we're interested in your perspective and definition on social entrepreneurship. So put it in short. You, audience, everybody who's here, if you put in 1-2 words, what is actually social entrepreneurship for you? That would make it really interesting for me to connect to that later on. And you can type in your answer if you go to menti.com. And I hope that it works, because you might be logged onto another number already. And I don't see anybody. Positive impact. Somebody has entered something. Okay, it does work. We have at least one person. And I'm sorry for the confusion I caused, but maybe if you have 5 more seconds and think about, there is no wrong answer. What in your head right now is social entrepreneurship? In 1 word, 2 words. And we see a lot of ideas are coming together: positive impact, fair working conditions, inclusion, health and safety, doing good, inclusive inclusion, doing fair work. Oh my God, this is dynamic. The future. And the bell is ringing. So we see a lot is coming together, and that would actually help me later on to connect your ideas to a little bit what we talk about in the academia when we look at social entrepreneurship. And I think that's enough for the moment. We have 11, 12 people. You can still do that, but I want to hand over back to Antonia. Antonia, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you guys for your participation. It's always really good to kind of think about it before we define it. And now we can actually, I'm going to start defining it. It's going to be like one of the official definitions. So I'm not going to guarantee that it's the one that we all agree on, but at least that's what I will tell you now. The aim of social entrepreneurship here is to create a social value and thereby like have a positive impact on society, on community. And this means that the business focuses on a social goal and or even multiple social issues, and use like innovation, long-term orientation for that. And the center of the activity is actually the social goal, and not only, or maybe not, the only like the profit maximization. And there are a wide range of different focuses that a social entrepreneurship can have. And I think some of you already said that it can be human rights. It can be integrating different part of the society, like disabled people, refugees. So it depends on what you want to focus on. And that is like a really broad definition with this social focus. Let's see whether we have some other definitions later. And now what I'm actually do is finally introducing our speakers. So you already came into contact with one of them, Markus Bachmann. And we also have Rüdiger Wetzel-Piewald and Tanya Tiffenbacher. First, I'm going to introduce Markus Bachmann, as we already started with him. And Markus Bachmann works as a professor for corporate sustainability management at the University Erlangen-Nürnberg, so in Germany, for now 9 years almost, I guess. But his passion for social entrepreneurship started even earlier, because he was earlier assistant professor for actually social entrepreneurship at the Leuphana University in Lüneburg, when I'm right. And there he also founded and directed a social change hub, which is like a student platform for innovation. And he told us also that we should tell that in his introduction that he is interacting with the field of social entrepreneurship with a critical admiration, so admiring it critically. Maybe you can explain that, what you mean with that, and maybe just quickly, introduce yourself and your work. That would be really nice.
Well, should I take this as also to present my slides at this point?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
You can just have
Okay,
some room
excellent.
for you.
So thanks for the invitation. I really love to be around people who care about, like, passionately about an issue like social entrepreneurship. And you already spared one slide. I don't have to introduce myself. And the critical admiration part, I will actually try to save for the discussion, because I think that's something nice to bring together different perspectives. But if I go to the screen, so I would now give that presentation, okay? Did I get that? Okay, then I would share my screen and let you know why maybe it might be actually not that uninteresting to have also academics who live in the ivory tower work on social entrepreneurship. So I've been doing that for at least 12, 13 years. And what I want to do with you is come back to your perspectives, what you said, what social entrepreneurship is, and actually have an additional question that I want to bring to the table. So we'll actually change now the slides and go to the first input you gave to me. You said, oh, what is social entrepreneurship for you? Put in short, it's about positive impact, inclusion, social value, but also health and safety, fair working conditions, human rights, something that relates to what Michi talked about as a previous topic, the future for younger peeps, and future of the economy, social, doing good, many things coming together. But there are also other concepts that talk about the future, about social issues, about doing good. So to what extent is social entrepreneur actually different? Is it something that is almost like pretty much the same to everything else, or is it something different? So my second question to you, all of you, is if you compare social entrepreneurship to other concepts you might have heard of, what are some concepts that you could typically confuse with social entrepreneurship that sound similar, but are similar but not exactly the same? Because sometimes it makes sense to think in terms of differences, because differences can bring out some relevant questions. So have you any ideas on concepts where you think, oh, this sounds similar, but I don't really know where exactly the difference, or I know where the difference is, and I would like to discuss that. And here we have sustainability, and we have CSR, and we have social responsibility. So actually many important topic. The SDGs or the EDGs and the NGO and MBO and greenwashing, social business, nonprofit. So these are all relevant concepts. And the question is, are they the same? Are they different? And so what? Why is that academic guy having those definitional questions that I used to hate when I was still a student? So if I go back, I will try to have a look at that. But if I go back to the slide, what I try to do in the following, and Antonia, I told you, you stop me if it gets too long. You just withdraw me the mic, okay? But what I want to do in the following is show you that there is a reason that there are different terms out there, and that actually you can raise different questions with it. And it doesn't matter what is the right definition, but what kind of definition serves us as a tool to ask questions that might matter for an entrepreneur on the ground. So what I want to do is actually look at the two sides: social, what does actually social mean, and what does entrepreneurship mean? And you will see there are different meanings of both words, which come to different combinations. And I try to walk through that quickly and show you the relevance by pointing out some questions. So let's start with the entrepreneurship side. So for you, that would be this side, the entrepreneurship side. If we look at entrepreneurship, what does it mean to be entrepreneurial? I mean, you said to solve problems in an entrepreneurial way, but it can actually mean various things. If you look at part of the discussion that comes from the nonprofit world, entrepreneurship was equated in one school very much by being a social enterprise that enterprises a nonprofit by creating financial resources compared to just taking donations. So on this side of the schools, some NPOs in the 90s and 2000s says, we always take donations, that makes us dependent. Why don't we come up with our own product and services? And if we do that and do something for unemployed or disabled people, we can become independent financially. And that's what business and entrepreneurship do. And one guy who popularized that in a really precise way, you probably heard of, is Muhammad Yunus, who said, hey, let's look at business. And we can look at business as an organizational form that creates all its revenues through the market. It's not dependent on donations, but that market money making is used for a social purpose without running a deficit. That's what entrepreneurs do. They don't have a deficit. They're not dependent on somebody else giving that money. But if they make a profit, they don't issue that profit as a dividend. They reinvest it into the purpose. So the focus is very much on where does your money come from? And then questions are, hey, could I create a market for my problem or earn money through services and products? And how do I do that? And how do I finance through entrepreneurship my social mission, which also creates a focus on an organizational form. You are a business. Antonia, you just said it's businesses to do that. But what about entrepreneurial Vereine, associations, or organizations that are not formed as a business? And actually, we have many of them. So that would be a different focus. So one way to define entrepreneurship is look at the financing strategies. Do you have a social purpose? And if you earn money in the market to achieve that social purpose, that's entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurial means being successful in the market. And you're not reliant on donations. You're not a charity that accepts checks from others without a service, but you actually prove yourself in the market. And if you do that 100% for Yunus, if you don't take any donations at all, then you're even a social business, not just social entrepreneurship. And that's cool. And that raises the question of financing, legal form. Are you tax exempt, charitable, Gemeinnützigkeit? Many, many relevant questions you have to focus on. But you just ask yourself, how do you finance what you do? Now, I earlier showed you that there is the social enterprise school, but also the social innovation school. And the social innovation school is, for example, embraced by Ashoka. You might have heard of that organization that popularized social entrepreneurship in all over the world. This is now a definition in German, but what Ashoka is interested in is, where are those groundbreaking ideas that solve problems and who scales them? So the focus is on ideas, innovation, and change brought about innovation. And whether that innovation is brought about by a business, by an NGO, doesn't really matter. I mean, everybody of you knows Wikipedia. Wikipedia was pioneered by Jimmy Wales. He created a Verein. It's not a business. They don't have money through the market, but every year they raise donations to use those funds in a really entrepreneurial way to make knowledge accessible. And that's innovative pure. I mean, it's a crowd solution, but it's not a business. And focusing on that innovation, that is entrepreneurial. So we are in Austria right now. I mean, not physically, but virtually. So this is Holy Schumpeter, Joseph Schumpeter, you might know, and he was Austrian. He said, the entrepreneur is the innovator, the one who brings ideas and innovations to reality. Entrepreneurship is about innovating. And if you look at that, you ask yourself, how do I create a social innovation? What is different when I innovate with purpose in mind? Is my innovation ecosystem different? Do I measure impact differently to know what actually works? Those are relevant questions if you focus on that innovation stuff. And then it makes sense to have that. You could also look at other people who innovate. Here you have Greta and Luisa and others who said, hey, let's disrupt with innovations this fossil-based economy. Let's change the world. It's about change. Is that social entrepreneurship? And then some people will say, well, innovation is about changing the system. But how do you do that? Do you do that directly by implementing the change, or indirectly by lobbying for that change? And then you can see, well, you have innovative people, but they are the activists. They create the pathway that enables change. They change the system, but not by offering clean energy, but by shutting off the coal companies, which is not the same. The social entrepreneurs are the ones who are innovative and implement the change. So entrepreneurship is doing. It's the Nike principle. So if you ask what is entrepreneurship here, der Unternehmer, die Unternehmerin, die unternimmt was. It's doing things. It's enacting stuff. It's bringing it to the world. And then finally, you can also say, what about entrepreneurship? Well, entrepreneurship in German is also to found a business, to make yourself the head of a new organization. So do you do this as a volunteer and you create the world, you change the world through activism, or you do something in a part-time job? Or do you actually make yourself the chef, or not the chef, that would be cooking food, the boss of a new organization, and you have an idea that actually finances you? And then it's all about venturing. How do you create a business with a business fellow that nurtures you? How do you reconcile the role of saving the world and paying your bills and all that Gründungsberatung, entrepreneurship stuff that we do when we try to look at how do you actually now create the steps towards becoming independent yourself? That is also relevant, but it's a different focus. So there are different definitions, and sometimes for a reason, because they're different questions, and then it makes sense to look at them. So that was the longer part, the social side. And then let's come to the entrepreneurship side. And now let's come to the social side. Because here we already said, well, I will wrap it up in a moment. If we look at the social side, social qualifies your entrepreneurial activities. Why do you enterprise, or how do you enterprise? And those are different questions. So on one side, you could say, well, you venture, and do you venture for society? So everything you do is actually meant to help society, and then you are purely purpose-driven. Or on this side, do you venture for your venture? And at the end of the day, your profit counts. And if you have that end of the spectrum, that's a conventional commercial enterprise business. But there are some businesses who say, well, I want to be profitable, but at the same time, I want to do it in a nice way. I don't want to harm other people. I want to be a socially responsible business. And then you have these CSR areas where you say, yes, I want to make money. I want to be successful. I want to innovate in a nice way. At the end of the day, my profits count, but they should be earned in an honest way. But you could also move further to the left and say, well, I actually want to raise profits, but to create impact for the community. And at the very, very end, you don't care about the profits at all. You have companies or organizations who say, my success would be that I will no longer be needed in the future. That's different from organizations who say, I want to be the most successful, fair, inclusive company in the market. Both talk about being fair, inclusive, and social, but one has a purpose outside the organization in mind. And the other one talks about how you redefine your own purpose for your own benefits. And these are relevant questions. Do you talk about CSR? Do you talk about companies who just try to solve a problem? Just to show you that it matters. If you look, for example, at the scaling of impact, so make impact big. If you're on this side of the spectrum, would say, I want to save the world as a company, and I want to grow myself and bring clean tech to everybody else. On this side of the spectrum would say, I care about clean tech or clean water, and everybody should have that. And then you, last slide, thank you, Antonia. And then you would be happy to be copied by everybody else who overtakes you. So I was just trying to show you that because we see that we have social as earning money in a decent way, or social as being the only issue you care about. And in reality, what we see is that many companies are something in between. Are they a banana? Are they a rabbit? Do they care about social purpose, or do they care also about their own success? And I would say they are rabbits or Rabanas. In German, it actually works better. Is it Kaninchen or Banane? It's Bananinchen. And they have different hybridities. And that brings up question. How do you deal with two different purposes or different logics? And that is something you can then bring to the table. And that was my first answer to your question. What is social entrepreneurship? It's many things. And it depends on what you try to look at. And whether that matters when the rubber hits the road, that is something we can test in the discussion. And then I happily end over. And that was my last slide. hand over back to Antonia.
Okay, thank you really, really much for your really well explanation of social entrepreneurship. And now actually we hand over to the next speaker because we still want to discuss and we still want to answer all your questions. And the next speaker is Rüdiger Wetzel-Piewald. And he is not only the CEO of the Social Business Club Styria, but also a board member of the Social Entrepreneurship Network Styria, not Austria, Styria. Beside that, he founded Concuritas, one of the most prime social businesses in Central Europe. And they have the concept to refurbish like old computer or other IT and thereby promote the environment and also social goals. And with that, they won like several prizes in the field of corporate social responsibility, social impact, and other things. And now I would actually like to hand over quickly to Rüdiger, and maybe he can also like introduce his work or whatever he wants to say to the audience.
Thanks, Antonia, for the nice introduction. Just one short thing. It's the CEO or director of the Social Business Club Styria, and then they have, luckily, after our German friends 2 years ago, they had been found the Social Entrepreneurship Network Austria, and they're my board member. So what I mean here, we have a regional strength and a nationwide as well. Why I'm saying that? Because we have a kind of lucky situation, let's say, in recent years. Because when, like you said, I found computers about 10 years ago. By the way, the current CEO is within our guests today. It's Matthias Di Felice. So if you want to approach him, do it. It's a great guy. For many years, it was quite hard to be a social entrepreneur, to found a social business. Thanks a lot, Marcus, for making this great explanation of the points. I have nothing to add. It's perfect. But why was it that hard? Because the typical situation for many years, it was, what is that? What is it good for? And third question, who is going to fund this? So typical confusions you have with social business, social entrepreneurship, that makes a lot of social entrepreneurs real pioneers in their industries. Because for a long time, it was impossible even to think about, to say, how can you bring together business and social purpose? That's things that for a long time were ruling out themselves, kind of. Especially in Austria, I like to say we have two types of religions. The first one is, if you want to make a living, go into business. If you want to make something good, go for non-profit. And the social entrepreneurs actually do both of it. It's the best of two worlds. I love to say this nice sentence because our prime minister says it as well, but we said it 5 years before him, so it's our sentence anyway. Why is it important to see that in recent years we are kind of lucky because we have really, really massively improved the numbers of social entrepreneurs, which is a very interesting thing to monitor. And this is, by the way, one of the jobs that we have in the Social Business Club Styria, that in the region of Styria, this federal state of Austria, we are the first ones to monitor the whole ecosystem. Why is this important? Because you can only tell things if you really know how many are there, what are they doing, what industries are they working in. And this was maybe interesting if you want to have a nice read afterwards. We have, about 2 years ago, we published the first social business report for the region of Styria. In these days, the second edition is following, by the way. And I can tell you, the first edition, we monitored about a little more than, I think, 105 companies. For the second edition, and it's only 2 years later, it's supposed to be around 150. So this is some kind of growth that a lot of businesses would dream about, but we are not talking about business only, obviously. But this is very important to see because we see trends, new trends to see, and we're in the middle of that. And I like to say I have a real luxury job because I'm every day approached with solutions and not problems. And this is what social entrepreneurs think of. They're thinking in solutions. They choose a problem before, and maybe you can make very shortly for yourself. This is a nice exercise. I like to bring in my presentations as well. Each and every one of us, you can think right away now in the 10 seconds or so. Each and every one of us has certain focus on challenges in our world. That means challenges could be environmental, could be really social purpose challenges, it's poverty, it's inclusion, it's gender topics, it's a lot of migration, whatever you name it. But what I can tell you, this is very important about thinking like a social entrepreneur, is that each and everyone might have different focus here. And why is that so important? Because it's all about variety, the variety of solutions. And you can imagine if I think we have around 30 people here, I can tell you for sure we will find at least 60 different topics. And why this is good? Because it's a kind of bottom-up approach. That means it's not that the state, for example, or some corporations, big corporation, choose one or a handful of topics they feel responsible of. It's really, and they put a lot of resources in that, and it's really great to say. It's really about individual people or teams choosing a topic and addressing as many topics as we have challenges in the world. And this is a very effective approach then to tackle those challenges. It's not that I always like to say they don't save the world, because it's not impossible for a handful of people in the end, because it's not so many social entrepreneurs, but they have a much more important function. And the function is they show ways how to save the world. And this is much more important. I think the last sentences of Marcus were, it's about being copied. And this is also very interesting to say, being copied in business and economic terms is not good, because you think about competition. I do not know any social entrepreneur out there who thinks first in competition. It's always first thinking in collaboration, because if you start being a pioneer for a certain challenge, social challenge, environmental challenge, it's really a lot about making things better. And you can imagine it's a contradiction in itself to say, I want to save the world, but me only, please. That doesn't work, obviously. So you start your business, you start making things better. And if you do it well, and this is what social entrepreneurs has as a main role, it's very important to say, I found a way to make things better and I can live from that. So that means it's sustainable, it's economically sustainable. I don't need donations. If I get some, fine, but it's not my prime business model. And if others see that, they will follow. They will follow being copied. I can tell you from the business like refurbishment, IT, for example, where I have some ideas about. In the meantime, I think when we started about 10 years ago, it was basically 1.5 companies, I like to say, in Austria, starting this topic of refurbishment in the hardware sector. By now, I would say it's, if I really count all of them, probably more than 20 companies doing the same. Not all of them, obviously, social entrepreneurs, but what we actually managed to show, it is possible to make business of good things in support of in benefit for the good things as well. Yeah? And it's not so important if all the others who are going to copy you are having the same mindset, but they're doing the same way of solution. And this makes the solution market much bigger. And this is what actually, I think one of the core sentences, it's really changing and transforming the markets for good. It takes a lot of time, but it's going to happen. And what is very interesting, and that's my last sentence, is really working. We know that, we are measuring that, and we can really see, we have many, even in theory, we have some really nice examples that one pioneer started, and actually they were going to be copied. And in the end, even the market leaders are going to copy that because they see the innovation, they see the positive image, which is fine. And they see they can be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And I think everyone would like to see be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Okay, so far that.
Thank you really much, Rudiger, as well, for your input. We will hear more of that, of course, later. And now I would quickly like to introduce Tanya Tiffenbacher. And maybe she will have another point of view here. She's the project manager at Tagwerk. Maybe some of you know Tagwerk. It's like a social orientated business in Graz. And here young people below 25 that like face difficulties in entering the labor market, they get a chance to get training, get work, get support. And together they produce handmade bags from upcycled material. And maybe Tanya will tell us more about it. Tanya, amongst others, studied psychology, so it's a different point of view here. And so she worked with different people from the society, with refugees, addicts, and other people. Yeah, so she has a good overview of the social dimension here and its relevance, actually. Yeah, do you also want to introduce yourself and say something, Tanya?
Hi everyone, thank you. My name is Tanya. I'm, as Antonia said, I'm the project manager of Tagwerk. I think we are social entrepreneurs, but not in a classical way. So I think we're kind of a mix, maybe so a rabbit banana or something. So on one hand, we are funded, but a big part of the project, we have to generate the money ourselves, and we have to sell our products and produce well and high quality products. So Tagwerk basically is a youth employment project. It's part of the Caritas, so it's non-profit. We stand for youth employment, we stand but also for design, quality and sustainability, both socially and environmentally. And our main goal or our main purpose is to employ and support young people between 15 and 25 in difficult life situations or with difficulties. So maybe a little bit about the history, because Tagwerk is in Graz since 1999. It was founded. It was a part of the Schlupfhaus from Caritas. It's a youth emergency shelter. Young people were sleeping there, and the idea was, okay, most of them are school dropouts, and to give them a daily structure. So they started to offer them jobs and work. In the beginning, it was things like mailing or gardening, and the incentive to get the young people there was to give them money for the work. So it worked out really well, and it was pretty easy to see that it closed the gap, especially at this time where young people who were not in school or not at education, they dropped through, so no one was taking care of them. So in 2000, it became a regular project. And in 2003, we started to work with recycling materials, and we designed and produced our first recycling bags, as we are known for in Graz. And at the beginning, it was really, we went to junkyards and get the seat belts from the cars to make the shoulder straps. Meanwhile, it's not possible like this, but still we work with mostly recycling materials, or we look for local product, also local shopping, so we get our products and materials. In 2005, we finally got our kind of flagship store in the Mrifestraße, where our shop is located in the ground floor. In the first floor, there was the sewing workshops. In the 21 years, we were still recreating, inventing, enlarging our project. So in the meantime, we have 2 sewing workshops, one for design, one for production, but we also have areas like wood and craft, image, sound and media, material and upcycling. And since last year, we also have the area Green Rooftop, based on a cooperation with UNM Research and the project Smart City Rooftop Farming at Science Tower. Our offer is for so-called needs. It's not in employment, training or education, young people between 15 and 25. And our offer is low threshold, flexible and needs-based. The kids can earn their mostly first own money. They get paid every day on a daily basis. If they work for 1 hour, half an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours. And they are allowed to act creatively, and it's important that we don't have a pity product, because the kids should be really proud of the product, and we want to have really a qualityful product with a good design, and so we can create our own profits and put it directly into the project with our kids. Yeah, I think that's basically what we are doing every day.
Thank you really much to give us an overview. And now actually we will come to Michael again. and he will go on with some questions, right?
Yeah, hey. Yeah, I think we now everyone knows broadly what social entrepreneurship is. It's a really broad definition that we got from Marcus, and we got some insights from Tanya. That's really interesting. You have so many things that you do, Tanya. Could you please give me some just more input on smart city and what is the suing? Would you go on a bit?
I know, I get confused myself sometimes because it's so much. It started with the sewing workshops. So we have just our sewing machines, and we try to learn our kids really handwerk. So they work with our hands and create their own product. So we make bags, we make backpacks, we make accessories out of recycling materials from tarpaulin, old leathers like leather jackets or awnings. But we also do, as I said, wood and craft. So in the last years, we made from youth centers, we made the innen architecture. So we designed it and we build it together with our kids. Material and upcycling is the part where we look, okay, in our workshops, what is waste and what we can do with the waste we are creating and make new products out of it. Image, sound, and media is kind of, we're in a digital world, so we make short videos, but we also make, I have to cheat now, screen printing, because I had no idea what's the English word for this. And the green rooftop part, as we started it last year, the Smart City Rooftop Farming is a project from UNM Research, directly on the Science Tower. It's a main building in Graz, a really high tower. They build it like Pflanztröge, where they put in vegetables and different kind of foods, and they try to create local production and use Dachflächen to work with it. And we are since 2018 with our kids preparing those vegetables, and we plant it in, we earn it, and so we try to get this climate and ecology factor in our thing. And we try to make our own projects now as well. So we start to get the green finger, kind of.
That's really cool. So how I understand it a little bit is you're innovative, of course. That was one thing about about the definition of social entrepreneurship, as far as I got it. But if I get it right, to some extent, it's a little bit of going back to the roots. We have like craftsmanship and growing your own vegetables. And now, Rudy, you know a lot of different social businesses in Austria and in Styria. Is that a common thing for the social entrepreneur innovators, that they go back to the roots and implement it in our modern world?
Oh, you can say it like that, but as I stated before, it's a huge variety. I just put the link for our social business report in English. The thing is, what we know is you really have different kind of disciplines, I would almost say, of realizing social business, being social entrepreneur. But there are two big lines we distinguish. The first one is talking about real innovation. That means to say you invent a product or a service or a process that the world has not seen before, a way of doing that is totally new, which is like typical startup environment, I have to say, which is also quite a common thing with social entrepreneurs as well, which is nice. And the second one is probably on the biggest scale, is that social entrepreneurs might not invent something totally new, but they redefine industries. Redefinition means if you're looking for challenges, that could, for example, mean I don't like the way that a certain industry works. I'll give you a nice example, we have, for example, Velo Food. It's a food delivery service, and the two guys that found that company about, I think, 3 years ago now, they're actually two guys who were working for a long time delivering package parcels by bike. Typical parcel delivery service, but by bike, because it's quicker, and there was a typical business. This is normal to do, and for some reason they thought, why is it actually that every pizza, every lasagna, every little piece of food is delivered by cars, which had been the reality for decades, actually. Yeah? And at least I would say for Austria, they were the first ones redefining the business to say, how can we do that differently? How can we actually define the weaknesses of this industry of delivery? Means a huge carbon emission, for example, meaning also, by the way, that the working conditions of the guys to actually deliver are by far not good. And they were very aware about these problems, and they said, okay, we need, and the third one was, by the way, the packaging, which is mainly made of plastic, yeah, for one-time use only, which is a huge waste of resources. It makes a huge piles of waste in general. So they were tackling with their solution those three topics. That means they did not invent something totally new, but the first thing is to say every piece of food is delivered by bikes only. Yeah, at that time they started, this was a kind of innovation at that time. Many followed later, as we know. It's quite hard to get a pizza without a bike today, luckily, more or less. And the second was to say, okay, about all the waste, packaging waste. Yeah, they actually, I would not say they forced, they invited all their delivery partners, all those restaurants, to use only packages. This is biodegradable, for example. And this works very well, by the way. If you go to their website, velofood.at, you can really see how they measure the tons of waste they saved the planet because they're using different sustainable packaging. And the third one, which is a really tricky one, the working conditions in this delivery service are really the worst you can imagine. Yeah, people are really having very low wages. They're actually exploited. It's modern slavery very often, unfortunately. I have to say something we imported from the United States. Well, and they said, well, no, we want our delivery staff to have a decent work. That means that they were really the first in Austria to think about this and to say, yeah, okay, so they paid actually some extra wage for them. It's not their solution, but I like a lot the sentence when Jonathan, one of the two guys, told me once, you know, we have been benchmarked by the Social Security, the local Social Security, for over 6 months because they could not believe that our guys have a decent work with a decent salary here, because this is not reality. 6 months, imagine. Though it's a small company. So actually they tackled all three of them without being highly innovative. But it's all about seeing things differently and doing them differently. And this is such a success story that I just tell you how far they get. In Austria last year, this was a real innovation. Austria is the first country in the world that introduced what we like to say Kollektivvertrag, means an official contracting for the bike delivery industry. First in the world, by the way. So you can see what small companies, small social innovation, so businesses actually are able to do, because they defined the topic and they brought a solution. This is the main power of such companies. They actually always show what's the problem, but it's not only activism, which is very important, but they really connected to a solution to say, and see, this is a way to make it better. So this is just one way. Mm-hmm.
I really love a bit of food. I use that innovation a lot. They're really cool service. You've said there are two different kinds, and real innovation versus redefined industries. And I think Tagwerk is somewhere more redefined industries as far as I saw it, and maybe Velo Food as well. Markus, maybe you have a real innovation company that you could tell us a little bit about.
Well, there are many examples, but if you allow, I would actually use that opportunity to answer Antonia's question in the beginning. What about the critical admiration of the field? Because earlier I said, I love the field. I've been around many years, and there are so many great people you meet. That's so inspiring. But at the same time, my role is also to sense the ambiguities and the dark sides. And sometimes there are waves of narratives. And one narrative is we have to innovate now, and then there are different kinds of innovation, as if innovation is always necessary. Sometimes you have great stuff that works, and nobody, I mean, it's important that it's done. And why do I do that? People love innovation because then you have a success story. Oh, we have that entrepreneur, I don't know, Bud Vietjens, that was many years ago, a great story. He thought about the problem of landmines. He knew that wasn't completely new, the solution. He knew landmines are a big issue in post-conflict zones. It's very dangerous and very expensive to demine areas. And that what he did is he trained rats, so those rodents, Ratten, which are very light. So if they trap onto a mine, nothing happens. But he trained them to sense with their smell the rats. And then you could actually train rats and train people as rat trainers to provide income to demine entire areas with the help of low-tech solutions. And that is a big innovation. And that's great. And if you look at that story, wonderful. But one of the dark sides, and now comes my dark side issue, is very often then you will go to award ceremonies and funders and people who give money to scale impact, and they will only look for innovations. And then you see if an idea is new, it gets money. If it's 5 years old, nobody cares about it anymore. And then sometimes you see organizations who get money in the beginning, and then they actually scale, and then they find it really difficult to go on. And I see that Tanya is not in, I don't know if Rudy has similar experience, but that innovation fetish is something that sometimes has a dark side, because they are great ideas who have been proven, and that's why they deserve attention. And just because something is new doesn't mean that we should no longer focus on the old solutions. So that was one of the elements where I sometimes think, okay, innovation is great, but let's not forget stuff that works. And maybe it's great to work for a company that's been around, or an organization that's been around for 100 years and doing, I don't know, inclusive kindergartens. Why isn't innovation always necessary to be sexy? I understand the idea.
That's a really good point. You don't always have to be really innovative. So now we have
and sorry, you don't have to. I think sometimes there's latent expectations that you have to justify yourself if you're not as innovative as others. And I would say care about impact. And if something old works, great.
Yeah, now we're going over to a more practical approach on social businesses. And I would give the word to Antonia.
Yes. And actually, I would like to come to the topic of like founding a social business, starting with it. I like to start with Rudy again. Like, what are the circumstances that are needed in order to successfully like establish a social business? And like, we also had the question of the audience who asked that what are possible obstacles when you want to found a social business?
Well, you could do the hard way like I did, but that's not a recommendation, obviously. Having no idea and just doing it. But the doing part is the most important, obviously. No, I think now it has changed a lot by now to say, what kind of support do I get? It's possible to receive to start this kind of business. Obviously, there are two things you probably know when you're thinking about starting a social enterprise. The first thing is, you know that there is a certain challenge that you want to tackle. And the second one is you want to do it in an entrepreneurial way. Those two things have to be sure, because very often it's a topic, well, should I do it as a company or as a nonprofit? Those are very important questions, because it's a very, very different way of working, a very different way of making turnovers and receiving the necessary financial budget that you actually want to cover. And a lot of difference in the legal status. What is interesting, by the way, to say next step would be, what is the legal form I choose, for example? It's very interesting. Actually, we know in Austria about 25% of all social entrepreneurs are actually officially non-profit, but that's important in Austria, we would say a Verein. But this is important, a Verein can just have the same entrepreneurial activities, yeah. This means it's just a different way of organization, different structure, but still, or as we, for example, have it, the Social Business Club itself is a Verein, but we are starting in autumn, we are starting an incubation program, so an impact incubation acceleration program. This will become it by a limited corporation enterprise, by the way. Yeah, so this is very boring legal stuff, but it's very important, even if you think of social or not social business to found. The second would be really to make it easier to really make a great preparation, use the time for having a good concept, and also very interesting, depending a lot on the topic, obviously. Who is my target group? Who is the customers I have? This can be the target groups, can be my customers at the same time, those who pay my bills, at the same time they benefit from my services or products, but it can also be to say, I have business to business, I have customers who pay my bills, but someone else's benefits actually from my activities. This is always important to see, not to mix up too a lot, yeah, because sometimes something which is important about what is social entrepreneurship. We have the definition, for example, to say at least 50%, but actually the goal should be 100% of my income should be market revenues. This depends a lot about what you do, obviously. And if you have a nice funding strategy or a fine donation strategy, that's fine as well. But it's got to be a professional approach. How do I get the money I need? Why I'm so much about money? Because in this case, it's the same as everywhere. If you cannot pay the bills for your employee or yourself, by the way, which is very often underestimated, you have a great idea which will long 6 months, 1 year, maybe, and then it's done. So sustainability means really to have an idea that can sustain itself. As the good part, let's say, if we are talking about a regular startup environment, it can take up to 3 to 4 to 5 years to get to the market. But luckily you had a lot of tech funding, or funding is paying your bills, and then it depends if it works or not. Social entrepreneurs don't have this, let's say, luxury. That means most of them get to the market very quickly, which is good, but then you're on the market. That means also you have to be tough as well. But that's like entrepreneurship is as well. It's a lot of work, but it's also very rewarding. Obstacles, money, obviously, and another obstacle could be that you did the research not properly enough. It should not happen to you to say, well, I have a great product. We have that sometimes, that people come, they have everything is already done. They have a great product, a great service, a great distribution line, but they forgot to ask the potential customers if they're interested. And this is a lot of work for nothing again. Yeah. Or let's say you have to redistribute the whole idea, losing time. So take your time for preparation, and very important, take the support you can get. This is, by the way, the social entrepreneurship or the Social Business Club steer is in steer the main point for that, for example. Just come and get support.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it makes really much sense. And how was it for you, Tanya? Did you also face like similar obstacles that with the planning and also with kind of making money out of it?
Of course, it's a little bit easier because we are part of the Caritas, so we have like a safe net behind us. But it was kind of a try and error, and we just we made it like Nike. We just do it and started it, and yeah. So we tried out different things, and we still do. We still try to be creative, to be kind of in our form innovative. We always have to make new products and to employ new fields, because if you stand still, you're just dying, kind of. And it's we are about like 50% funded, but the other 50% we have to generate by our own works, and it's really difficult, especially if we work with people who are not able to bring so much productivity. So sometimes we just have kids who are there, and it's important for them to be there, but they're not creating or producing stuff. So it's a fine line between being a social project and at the same time we have to act like a company, because we have to generate like about 300,000 euros a year. So that's not that less for us. So it's very difficult. And the second one is the funding is with the years. So we know that part as well. With the years, it's getting less and less and not more. And costs, especially the wage costs, are getting higher and higher every year. So we have to generate even more, and you kind of running after a carrot and don't really reach it. So the real goal would be, or the dream would be, that 100% we create our own, but it's really difficult.
Yeah, actually, now that we can now lead on to the next kind of set of questions needed for the kind of the circumstances that should be there, like the political environment, like the support that you need for this topic. Maybe you have some questions there, Michael, with we can go on.
Yes, but before we do that, I would have one more question for,
Also
I
fine.
think, all of them three. Maybe you all have one tip for a student who wants to become a social entrepreneur. What is the one thing that you have to have in mind? Maybe Tanya, you can begin.
I think a lot of motivation, and be not afraid to work your ass off. And
that's a really good tip.
Yeah, you need a goal, and you really want to get your goal. So
Nice. Okay, stay motivated and have goals in your mind. What do you think, Rudy?
I can give thousands of tips, but I pull it together to one: connect to the Social Business Club Styria. It helps save a lot of empty kilometers.
Okay, then motivation, goals, and a network. So Marcus, what can you add?
Maybe I come back to my critical admiration. When I, like 15 years ago, when social entrepreneurship became big, like the old generation of social entrepreneurs I met, they said, oh, it's interesting. Finally, I have a term to describe what I'm doing. I had a problem that I had to solve in my agency, in my community, in my family, and I turned it into an organization, and now I have a word for it. I think good news is that we have a word for it, that if you talk to tax accountants, if you talk to regulators, if you talk to grant donors, they know what you're talking about. I think the downside is that sometimes in my classes, students said, when I'm old, I will become a social entrepreneur. And then I would always ask, why? Why are you needed? Why do you want to do this? Do you have an idea that it's better than somebody, that is what is out there? Do you want to create an impact? Why do you want to become a social entrepreneur? And I think very often in some of my classes, I came across people who just knew that they wanted to do it. But if you push them, why do you want to do that? What is your contribution? And what are the alternatives? Maybe your talent would make an impact if you go to another social entrepreneur, or if you go into a public administration, or if you work for a business company in CSR. And my first advice would be, can you clarify why you are needed? That brings you to all the questions Rudy raised. Do you have an idea? Does it work for your target group? Can you then look what way works best for you? Is it nonprofit, for-profit? But just the motivation could blind you to some other opportunities that might be interesting for you and for society.
Yeah, if I try to read a bit between the lines, then maybe you also mean having a feedback loop. So maybe you think you have the good idea, but you should have some feedback from someone else. Is it? Are you on mute?
Feedback is always good to bring you back on track. And if you found any business, is it social or commercial, I mean, that lean idea that you start with a prototype, that you don't sit in your building and work for years without talking to your customers, to your suppliers, and suppliers here would be your network partners and your ecosystem. Know them, talk to them. And what is great about the ecosystem in social entrepreneurship, that there are many other actors who will be willing to cooperate with you and give you that feedback. And maybe you get the feedback, the idea is great. Maybe you get the feedback, your idea would fit perfectly into my venture. Why don't you join us?
And don't ask your mom, she would ask you to find a real job, which mine did, for example.
Yeah, and to come to our last bigger part of we know what social businesses are, and now we may have some idea about what founding a social business for oneself means. Now, I would like to know a little bit about the political structures around that. So also maybe on founding a business. And it's a good thing that we have like people from at least 2 different countries. So we could maybe see what is good in Germany, what is bad there, and what is good in Austria and bad there. Maybe Markus, I would like to ask you what policies do facilitate social businesses?
I think this is a really good question. I find it difficult to answer because there are very different degrees of the challenges. I think there is an awareness now that there are governance forms between the non-profit and the pure for-profit logic, and that they get recognition. That's important. I don't see it modeled in the legal forms and tax status systems that works well. I know from some cases where one of the biggest challenges of founding a business is finding an organizational form that you can explain to the tax authorities. And that creates many important barriers and hurdles because, and actually if you do something wrong, if you get the bad advice, you could go bankrupt for that if you have to pay back taxes. So those legal forms that allow hybridity and the kind of advice and support structure that give you that very specific knowledge, that is not really well established in Germany. We just had a PhD project on what the implications are for social entrepreneurs, and many actually suffer from the lack of support they get. So support in terms of counseling, sometimes also mentoring and coaching because of the emotional issues attached to it. I mean, if you try to run a business where you save the world, and I mean, Tanya, you said you could include some people into your business that really benefit from it, but maybe those who benefit most are not the ones who are most productive. And if you have to make ends meet, at the end of the day, your own salary depends on it and whether you can buy food at the end of the day. That puts many, many different challenges onto one person's shoulders. And supporting that through legal structures to counseling advice, support networks, I think we can get better here. And I'm already talking too much because practitioners know better what they wish from policies.
Maybe Tanya, you can answer to this open question. So what legal problems did you encounter, and how should it be done better? What could we do?
I think I'm not an expert in this in this topic, but as I said, it would be much easier for us because our project is very low threshold, so it's very difficult for us to have the social project, and on the other hand, have to create so much money at the same time a year. So for us, it would be much easier if the funding would a little bit more go up and not just go down. So we can hold our project as it is right now. Otherwise, we have to look for young people who are able to work and are able to produce, and we're getting apart from our actual goal where we want to work with. So that's kind of a problem we are into.
So you would really benefit from it if it not only funding on innovations, this short-term funding, more like a long-term funding would be better for you.
Yeah, social funding.
May I add a comment?
Okay.
I try to keep it short. I mean, what Tanya does is she does a great service for society. I mean, the integration and the cost that it saved in terms of the future benefits for the individuals, their families, and the communities are huge. And you actually save future costs for society. Why aren't you not compensated by the government and say, okay, if you do that, you get a certain amount of compensation for that? That would be the quasi markets we sometimes have for those kind of projects. And that is something where the government could do a lot. And it's actually very difficult for new entrepreneurs to get into those existing systems because sometimes they are quite well defended by the incumbents. So I see the practitioners nodding, so I'm not completely off track here.
Yeah, no, thanks. My English is pretty rusty, so thankful for your help.
Rudy, do you see any possible changes that are made?
Yeah, I can actually. The thing is, what it does need, it's not a single social entrepreneurs who can go into this, because it really needs to understand the decision structures, especially in lawmaking. I can give you a very good news again here for Austria. At least we are at the beginning. Until recently, the legal framework for social entrepreneurs did simply not exist. You're just treated like a regular company concerning taxes, concerning employee, whatever, concerning VAT, whatever. Yeah, there's only one form that favors social, or let's rather say almost non-profit companies, but this is meant actually for very different type of companies. And I can tell you, all over Austria, we have around, I think around 530,000 companies, and around 300 of them got this status. You can imagine, forget about this. So it's not made for social entrepreneurs, it never was. But the Social Entrepreneurship Network Austria managed, for example, to bring in the term of social entrepreneurship in the last coalition paper, which is the highest decision ground on politicians, which is very good. Of course, that means nothing, because we already have to follow those options that are in there, but it's the first time that really managed to bring it prominently in this paper. And now there's, for example, a big discussion, an important discussion in general about making a new legal company form. It's supposed to have to call the term of Austrian Limited. You heard it, you can forget about it. That's not what it's all about. But what we are doing, we are lobbying, and I like lobbying if it's for the right thing, very important. Lobbying is not bad, it's just for the wrong people doing lobbying, it's a bad thing. Not to have our own legal company form, because there are discussions, is it good to have your own thing? We think it's not, because it's kind of stigmatizing as well. Yeah, that's just the social guys, forget about this. It's not real economy. No, it's more about to say, we are actually in a moment in negotiation with the Justice Minister of Justice and Economy as well, to make a special status. That means you can found whatever kind of company in a legal term. Might it be a limited, might it be a smaller version, whatever we have in Austria, we have a lot, but we would like to have an additional status of being social entrepreneur. And that means that you have to prove that status as well. Proving means, and that's very important, we're always talking about this kind of sustainability and impact, but if you don't measure the impact, no one is believing you have the impact. Your supporters like it, your customers maybe, but the accountant's office, the tax office has no idea, so they will not recognize that. But means if you manage to have, and this is possible, definitely, to show your impact and you get that status, this would be the perfect precondition to get benefits. Benefits like, for example, paying less VAT. The VAT is actually to get more competitive, or to have, which is a very important thing, very often forget, that you have better chances to get requests from public procurement, because the public spends billions over billions of euros every year. And actually they should take as part of the responsibility to also invest, if you want to request products and services from social entrepreneurs, which they hardly do, because they are not recognized as such. So this would be a lever that helps a lot those companies. And it's just not giving gifts, because giving gifts is not enough. Yeah, it's really just being in the market like everyone else. Or you can have maybe a better status for fundings, for regular fundings. That means, but we want to have social entrepreneurs to be maybe have an advantage, or let's say, for example, a regular company gets 100,000 euros of funding, a social entrepreneur or social business gets 200,000 of funding. So there are many types of making it better with the legal frame, but the first of all is to being recognized, and this is what we are working on in the moment. Luckily, I hope, let's talk next year about this, we managed to do this.
So I see it's very complex to find the right legal form. Maybe there was one thing, maybe Marcus, you know a little bit more about that, if it fits to the problem. I will speak about the purpose enterprises. They are also lobbying to form a new legal form somewhere between Verein and GmbH. Is that something that could come up?
There are actually many debates. I don't know whether you refer to the Verantwortungsunternehmen, Purpose GmbH, where the idea is that basically you commit the capital, the funds of the organization to the organization with a purpose that cannot be, so that the company cannot be bought by another company, or that all the dividends will be reinvested for the purpose. And there are actually many companies out there like Bosch doing that for many years, and new companies like Ecosia. And that is, I think, there also the idea that you allow that to be similar to the existing limiteds, so that companies actually have the choice. And I think it's important that there is choice, because there's variety. And it's important to explain that and actually to support people in making the right choices. Because if you have an idea and you have a motivation why you want to become a social entrepreneur, you don't want to get lost in the jungle of legal complexity. So your question was, is it similar? The discussion is similar, but it's not the same. You can have Bosch, for example. They are a supplier in the automotive industry, and I wouldn't call them a social entrepreneurship organization, but that brings us to that entire discussion. Where do you draw the line? And I think what Rudi was talking about is more about those, I figure also about those newer startups that have not been around for 200 years or 100 years and try to settle their lineage for the future. Welcome back, Michael. Great to see that your battery reconnected.
Yeah, I just switched my webcam. Yeah, so okay, maybe that's a good side on it. It's very complex at all. Antonia, maybe we have some more questions that are not fully answered from our audience. Do you have something?
Yes, we have actually several ones. And actually, as you just said, like a company like Bosch isn't a social entrepreneurship company. We have the question here: is it possible for a corporation, let's say Volkswagen, to become a social business? Is such transformation possible at all? And wouldn't taxes that are missed out here in the end would hurt the initiatives such as Tagwerk? Ah, yeah. I get what you mean. Okay, do you get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That who wants to? Marcus, could you?
Sure.
You nodding?
Sure. Well, it depends on the definition of social business. If you say a social business is an organization that has all its revenues from the market and reinvests all the profits into the purpose, then first you would have to say, okay, what is actually the social purpose of Volkswagen to have as many diesel cars on the street? Okay, let's have a discussion about purpose. But then in the current legal form, it wouldn't be possible, because Volkswagen right now is a for-profit company that is traded in stocks, and they have a legal obligation to make a profit and to issue it to their shareholders. And they have other legal obligations to other stakeholders as well. So it's technically, short answer, right now, it's not possible. Would it be desirable? And I think that's a valid question, because if we turned everything into social business, would that be a better world? And I would always say, no, not really, because there are different kind of problems. And for each problem, we have to see what works best. And I think that's an empirical question. Maybe it's good to have some for-profit companies that compete with products where we consumers say, well, we in the market, like in for-profit markets, we look at clean cars and We try to be as efficient and productive and profitable, and then tax those companies to build our infrastructure for schools and hospitals and so forth. I mean, profit making just means a company makes more money than it spends, but whether that is at the cost of society or whether they actually do that for the benefit of society because they found something innovative and efficient, that's again a separate question. And we can design profit companies that are fair and so forth and tax them. But sometimes when you work, for example, Tanya, if I understood that you work with people that face hurdles in the general labor market, but they're talented people. But if you leave them to the for-profit logic, they will not get the openness to their talent. And then for that kind of problem, I think it's absolutely fine to have something that is subsidized, or something that works in the market. I don't know the details, but I think if you want to pay tribute or respect to the reality of people and situations, and they're complex, and that's why it's great we have for-profit companies, social entrepreneurs, non-profit companies, public administrations like Gesundheitsämter, which is always seen as something unsexy. Now we see that it's super important, and bringing everything together, I think then we can go forward.
Yeah, so you think still in the future, we still need for-profit companies that pay proper taxes where the money comes from?
Absolutely.
Okay, do you agree with that, Uri?
I definitely agree that Volkswagen is never going to be a social business, especially for the shareholder idea. That means you reinvest your, why would you reinvest your income, your revenues? Because you want to maximize the positive impact. If you drain that money to give it to someone who has a share of your company, maybe those people make a positive impact, but it's not their job. So what I see is, I see it a little different. I mean, realistically said, obviously, we are never going to transform the whole economic landscape to a term of sustainability or social business. And it's definitely not necessary to have it. What it needs from me is a mixture of definitely many more social businesses in terms of doing sustainable business, which does not harm anyone, but benefits as many as possible, or as much as possible, talking about environment, for example. And then the rest of the, for sure, bigger landscape of economy is supposed to as less harm as even possible. Yeah, if you do it by law, or if you do it by voluntary action, which does not work so much anyway, that depends. But it means, I always like to say, I don't care if you're a social or a non-social or whatever company, under the line, you do have to do more benefits than harm. That's the most important thing. And this on an objective basis. In the moment, obviously, we live in a world that means if the economic maximization of profit maximization is the only thing under the line, that's not enough, obviously, because it's actually bought on terms of a lot of harm to other people or the environment. So this has to be at least neutral or better. We are very far away from that. Maybe I would just like to say it's always very interesting to see in research, for example. I think we have probably about 200 years of research in economic and profit maximization and hundreds and thousands of key figures. If you compare that to the social sustainability, it's a universe away from that, because the profit has been developed that far that it's so far ahead, and now it needs a change in this, and change into say, okay, now the new sustainability is the new sexy thing out there, obviously. It's the new rocket science in the end, and each and every company sooner or later should follow that, whether you like it or not. That's the question. This is why we live sometimes in hard times for, let's say, hardcore for-profit companies, which is totally fine, but obviously they have to defend their profit-only mindset more and more, which is good, because that means sooner and more. And I have a very positive, just one thing. Last week, I was talking to a bank manager, one of the top in one of the Styrian banks, and he says it's very clear that we are going to change between the next 10 years to mostly sustainable funds. Yeah, that we are investing our billions of money they have actually Not because we're nice people, because we don't have any other choice. So I hope that's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's a nice, maybe a follow-up question. That's a really nice perspective. And there was one other question from the audience that plays a little bit with this idea of not focusing only on money. And it's towards Tanya, because you're working with young employees. And the question is, money could be one of the incentives to motivate young people to work. But besides that, what else do you think is there to motivate them?
I think money is the first incentive. So because they can earn money at our place, they're coming to work for us because it's all free will. So they need an incentive to come and to do something. And if they stay a little bit longer, it's clear that it's getting different things because the self-confidence is getting higher because they made and create their own product with their own hands. Tagwerk is like a little bit, we make it like a little bit like a family. So it's a security without the other family. So they feel safe, they have a space, they have time, they are not pushed in any way. So we really try to pick the kids where they are and don't push them in any way, and they're coming. So it really like evolving and start to see themselves differently. Because I can do something, I'm not worthless. And so there's a big change with the time.
Oh, hopefully I'm not too old to work for your company. That sounds really good.
You can try. Volunteer.
Antonia, do you have one more question?
Yeah, there are actually quite some more questions. Let's come to Rüdiger again. And you said long before that social entrepreneurship is the best of the two worlds. But is there the chance that there needs to be the compromise that you have to give up one world at the cost of moral standards, that you see like you kind of focus more on the profits and the entrepreneurship side than the social work? Is there, can it turn towards that the company has to turn?
Understand. That's a very good question because it's really about this can happen, by the way, even talking from my own experience, my entrepreneurial experience. It's really about you start obviously with the purpose-driven idea. And yes, you need a business model, but in the end, my experience was, let's say, one does not work without the other. So it's not whether this or that, it's really about both are fostering each other. Why is that important? Because if you have a business model that actually really goes into the topic of, look, there's a problem, I have a solution, and becoming my customer, you are the part of the solution. In the moment you, let's say, step back from the idea that you make the solution the core of your business model, people would maybe not be, I mean, it depends on your customers, of course, but this is, I like to say, this is the prime USP you have, the unique selling proposition in comparison to others in the market. You have to say, look, this is the reason why we do this. This is the purpose is the reason for our business. And customers recognize that and reward you by becoming customers. The others you have obviously as well to convince by quality, by price, and all the typical things. But you have a different story to tell, and the story is so important. I can tell you about all those awards Computers got. In the end, most of them were only about telling a story. And I tell you something much more interesting. Most of the awards we would have got without having a business, just telling the story. No one is looking actually if you really have the business. It's very interesting, a huge matter of trust actually, but they like the story. And yeah, of course the company exists, by the way. But it's really making the story, and social entrepreneurs always have the best stories, by the way, because they're really addressing real things. They have a huge amount of credibility, which is so important in business. Credibility is one of the most important things. And if you combine all those, the big story with the social purpose on the one hand, with the real necessary solution, the solution is your products, this is your business, If that works together, you have a good chance to make a good social business as well. If you leave this, if you forget, or let's say if you step back from the purpose, you're just a regular company. That's fair. That's fair enough, but it's not necessary to say you have to go to this direction and forget about the social purpose. I would say that's not good. On the other hand, if you forget about the business, you have a purpose and no business. So take both of them.
Yeah, I think that's really good to have this story to motivate the young people to follow to the North Star. I have one last question that is on a different scale, that has a more global view on this whole thing, and it's towards Markus. Actually, it's towards Mr. Bachmann. In your opinion, do we need a global acting institution that defines and controls regulations for social entrepreneurship in order to help them compete against traditional businesses, compete? I think it is compete against traditional businesses and boost change. Do you have an answer to that?
I think that's a tricky question. I don't know whether I have a good answer. I find it very difficult to define what would be good circumstances for social entrepreneurship in Germany, because there are so diverse issues. And I wouldn't, what I'm grappling with, what I need to understand is the framing to protect social entrepreneurs against for-profit companies. Because it's as if we have two parties that are fighting against each other. And I would like to think of, if we as society have many problems, then let's look at the toolbox, what kind of concepts we can bring forward. And I think social entrepreneurship is exciting and it's great that it's there, but I would like to combine it with other tools, not put it into competition with other tools. Sometimes there are issues where we need protection in terms of greenwashing. Rudy talked about claims where people say that impact, and how do you prove that? And then we need standards. And I think that we need standards for fair for-profit firms, absolutely. But that is standards also for responsible business. But I see that what I see as exciting is that there are many cross-sector initiatives where you have the nonprofit sector, profit sector, and the hybrid things in between that sometimes don't know whether they're rabbit or banana, actually work together and try to bring forward impact. And as I said before, I'm in critical admiration of social entrepreneurship. I love that field, but as something to combine with other things. I mean, if you look at Rudy said, maybe I'm a little bit in disagreement here, but maybe on another page we do agree, because I think social entrepreneurs is cool in combining elements of two worlds. Whether it combines the best of two worlds in terms of being better than nonprofit and better than for-profit, I doubt it. Because if I look at the current refugee crisis and refugees who are somewhere on a Greek island, I don't want to wait for a social entrepreneur who makes a business out of helping them. We need help now. And I think nonprofit solutions work now in the short term. And I don't want to, nonprofit world has to play a role here. Because sometimes business models just don't work because you have people who cannot pay and other people who are not interested. And I think we have, as a matter of fairness, we shouldn't rely on market mechanisms to work. And on the other hand, if we look at COVID, we see that with BioNTech and Pfizer, we have for-profit companies bringing like vaccines to the table. And that's what for-profit companies with their research can do. And then wedding that to social entrepreneurs to bring those vaccines into community and actually scale the impact, and having the government fund it through the taxes we pay as employees and companies and shareholders. I mean, bringing that together, I think, is much more interesting. I think I dodged the question a little bit, but maybe because it makes me, I think it more fruitful to think about regulations to combine those contributions than drawing a line between antagonists. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I don't want to be mean and say you're a little bit around and like a politician. I think you want to give the right mindset.
Yeah, thank you very much. And actually, we think that we somehow have to come to an end, because now we already talked in more than 1.5 hours, and maybe some people get tired because it's evening, whatever. So I just quickly summarize that we agreed that there are many definitions and it's not an easy topic to kind of generalize. And for founding a business, there are many different obstacles, mainly money-wise, actually, like financial obstacles, but also motivation and the legal form can be an obstacle. So there's still a long way to go, but still there's an improvement, as Rudi was saying many times. So yeah, we just hope that it's going in the right direction and that there will be more and more business in that way, and also more support, financial and also from the government side. And we really love all of your input. It was super good to have you in here, and so many good points. So we just want to ask you whether you have something you still want to say, because we say bye to all you guys. If there's something you still want to bring in, of course, feel free to do that. Now it's the room for that.
Famous last words.
Yeah.
Let me just say thank you for the invitation, for the great event. I think you're doing a great job here by spreading the word, which is probably the most important thing about the social entrepreneurship ecosystem. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, really nice. I just want to add a big thank you from my side, and also from I think the whole oikos side. Thank you to Tanya, thank you Rudi, thank you Marcus for attending, for discussing, for describing what you have seen, what you sharing your knowledge. It's really good, really nice to hear that there are really motivated people. And I hope we could motivate some young students to work in that field and go on with that. Before I'll let you all go into the night and drink some more beer or do anything, listen to the podcast. Just want to remind that this was like our first episode of a whole series of a Reconomy, our brave new business world. And next month, on the 22nd of March, our next event will be about degrowth, or about the thing, what is growth, what is a degrowth economy. And I hope we will have a delighting talk like this was. And now I only can say have a good night. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye bye. Thank you.